Paimon's gender. The demon Paimon requires a male host. This forms the backbone of the entire film's plot, as Hereditary's cult spent decades maneuvering to transfer the demon from Charlie's female body into Peter's male one. According to demonology texts, Paimon is one of the 8 kings of hell, traditionally appearing as a man riding a camel and commanding legions of demons. The demon's preference for male hosts explains why Ellen tried to breastfeed Peter as an infant, why she was so attached to Charlie despite the girl's strange behavior, and why the entire family needed to be systematically destroyed to complete the ritual. The cult's entire operation hinged on this single demonic requirement, turning what seemed like family tragedy into calculated sacrifice. Charlie's true identity. Charlie was never fully human. From birth, she was a vessel for Paimon, with Ellen successfully implanting the demon into her granddaughter's body. This explains Charlie's bizarre behaviors throughout the film. The compulsive tongue clicking, her fixation on dead animals, the strange drawings, and her complete emotional detachment. When she tells Peter, "I'm not worried," before the party, it's because Paimon knows exactly what's going to happen. Her decapitation wasn't a random accident, but a necessary step in the possession transfer. The demon needed to leave Charlie's body to eventually enter Peter's, and the shocking brutality of her death serves the cult's purpose perfectly by traumatizing Peter and making him psychologically vulnerable. Charlie's odd mannerisms weren't quirks of a strange child. They were a demon struggling to inhabit an unsuitable host. Ellen's master plan. Ellen Lee orchestrated everything across multiple generations. She joined the cult of Paimon years before Annie was born, and every family relationship became a chess piece in her ritual planning. Ellen attempted to feed her breast milk to Peter when he was an infant, trying to transfer Paimon directly into a male host, but Annie stopped her. When that failed, Ellen had the demon placed into Charlie instead, buying time for another attempt. She pushed Annie away emotionally, ensuring her daughter would feel guilt and obligation after Ellen's death. She befriended cult members like Joan decades in advance, positioning them to manipulate Annie at precisely the right moment. Ellen even coordinated the timing of her own death, ensuring it would destabilize the family right before the ritual's final phase. The funeral scene reveals dozens of cult members in attendance, all strangers to Annie, proving Ellen maintained an entire secret life dedicated to Paimon. Every family trauma Annie experienced, from her father's death by starvation to her brother's suicide, may have been engineered by Ellen to isolate Annie and make her easier to manipulate. Steve's awareness. Steve Graham knew more than he admitted. Throughout the film, Steve makes references to Ellen's attempts to interfere with the family and speaks about her with unusual specificity for someone discussing typical in-law problems. He's immediately resistant to Annie reconnecting with her mother's belongings and becomes defensive when Annie wants to throw away Ellen's things. During arguments, Steve mentions specific incidents of Ellen trying to get her hooks into the children, suggesting he witnessed concrete manipulation attempts. Some fans theorize Steve discovered evidence of the cult but chose to ignore it, prioritizing family stability over confronting an impossible truth. His desperate attempts to keep the family together and his resistance to Joan's involvement suggest he sensed danger but couldn't articulate it. When he burns the sketchbook, he's trying to destroy evidence he doesn't fully understand, acting on instinct that something in Ellen's legacy threatens his family. The treehouse symbolism. The treehouse is Paimon's throne room. Ari Aster designed the structure to mirror a temple, with the final scene revealing it has been decorated with cult symbols and regalia throughout the film. The treehouse sits elevated like an altar, separate from the main house, representing a space between the earthly and demonic realms. When Peter's possessed body is crowned in the treehouse at the film's climax, surrounded by cult members bowing in worship, the structure's true purpose becomes clear. It was never Peter's childhood retreat. Ellen likely had it built specifically as the site for Paimon's coronation, and its presence in the family's backyard for years represents how the demonic has always been woven into their domestic life. The miniature version Annie builds in her artwork foreshadows its ritual significance. Joan's introduction. Joan's encounter with Annie at the grief counseling session was completely staged. Joan is a high-ranking cult member who orchestrated the chance meeting, targeting Annie at her most vulnerable. The timing is too perfect. Joan appears exactly when Annie is isolated, grieving, and desperate for connection. She shares a convenient parallel story about losing her own grandson, building false intimacy. Joan already knows everything about Annie's family situation before they meet, allowing her to manipulate Annie's emotions precisely. The seance Joan teaches Annie isn't grief therapy, it's the actual ritual to transfer Paimon from Charlie's severed head into Peter's body. Joan provides the spelled incantation, disguised as a harmless spiritual exercise, weaponizing Annie's guilt and maternal love. Cult members likely tracked Annie's movements and scheduled Joan's appearance at the support group, ensuring she'd be there to catch Annie at her breaking point. Quick note, if you're finding this interesting, I create content like this all the time. Subscribing would really help me out. Miniatures as Control Annie's miniature artworks represent her complete lack of agency. She obsessively recreates traumatic family moments in tiny, controlled environments. But even this attempt at processing trauma serves the cult's purposes. Her art gallery shows miniatures of her sleepwalking incident with paint thinner, her mother's death, and other family horrors, all trapped in small boxes she can observe but never escape. The film's opening shot zooms from a miniature into the real house, visually suggesting Annie and her family are themselves pieces in someone else's diorama. In the final scene, the camera pulls back from Peter's possessed body in the treehouse, framing it like another miniature, implying the entire film has been a pre-constructed ritual playing out exactly as designed. Annie's art doesn't give her control, it illustrates how controlled she's always been. She's building scale models of a life that was never truly hers to direct. The decapitation motif. Decapitation appears throughout Hereditary as Paimon's signature. Charlie's death by telephone pole wire is the central beheading, but the imagery saturates the entire film. Ellen's grave is desecrated and her head stolen for use in the ritual. Annie discovers the headless corpse in the attic surrounded by candles and cult symbols. Joan's supposed grandson died mysteriously, and his ghost during the seance appears agitated in ways suggesting similar violence. The cult's worship space in the treehouse features crowned heads as decorative elements. Statues and drawings throughout show headless or severed figures. Near the film's climax, Annie herself becomes a headless corpse, her body controlled like a puppet while her head bangs against the attic entrance. The decapitation pattern isn't random violence, it's ritualistic separation of mind from body, allowing Paimon to claim new vessels. In demonology, removing the head symbolizes stripping away human consciousness to make room for demonic possession. Peter's allergies. Peter's nut allergy serves as the cult's weapon. The chocolate cake at the party contains nuts, and while it appears Peter didn't warn Charlie adequately, some theorists argue the cake's presence was orchestrated. Joan or other cult members may have influenced the party hosts to ensure nuts were present, creating the circumstances for Charlie's death. Peter's medical vulnerability becomes a tool to engineer the accident that moves Paimon from one host to another. His allergy also kept him from attending many childhood events, isolating him from normal social development and making him more psychologically fragile. The allergy represents how even biological facts about the Graham children serve the cult's long-term planning. The clicking sound. Charlie's tongue clicking is Paimon speaking. The compulsive sound she makes throughout the first half of the film isn't a nervous tic, but a form of demonic communication or manifestation. After Charlie's death, Peter begins making the same clicking sound, signaling that Paimon is transferring between hosts. The click appears in moments of stress or dissociation, suggesting the demon asserting control. Cult members likely recognize the sound as confirmation that Paimon inhabits a vessel. In the final scene, as crowned King Paimon, Peter no longer makes the sound because the demon has fully taken control and no longer needs to signal its presence through involuntary tics. The clicking was Paimon's struggle to maintain connection while trapped in an unsuitable host. Annie's sleepwalking. Annie's sleepwalking episodes represent early demonic influence. The film reveals she once sleepwalked and covered herself and her children in paint thinner, nearly lighting them on fire before Steve woke and stopped her. Peter mentions being terrified to sleep as a child because of his mother's nighttime wandering. These episodes could be mental illness exacerbated by family trauma, or they could be the cult testing its ability to control Annie from a distance. Her sleepwalking returns near the film's end when she's found floating outside Peter's door, fully possessed and no longer conscious of her actions. The history of sleepwalking establishes Annie as someone whose body can be controlled without her awareness, making her an ideal vessel for manipulation. Ellen may have genetically passed down vulnerability to possession, or the cult may have been practicing control techniques on Annie for years. The telephone pole. The telephone pole where Charlie dies bears Paimon's sigil. Careful examination of the film reveals cult symbols marked on the pole, suggesting the location was chosen in advance. The angle of the wire, the timing of Charlie leaning out the window, and the route Peter drives all align too perfectly to be accidental. Some theorists argue cult members sabotaged the pole or wire deliberately, ensuring it would catch Charlie at the exact moment Peter swerved. Others suggest supernatural forces guided the car to that specific location. The pole's placement near the Graham home also seems significant, keeping the death close to the family's ritual space. After the accident, the area becomes a makeshift memorial, but the flowers and tributes hide the occult markings that reveal the spot's true significance as a pre-planned execution site. Cult member cameos. Cult members appear throughout the film as background observers. Ellen's funeral is packed with unfamiliar faces, all cult members Annie doesn't recognize, proving her mother maintained an entire secret community. In Peter's classroom scenes, one student appears in multiple shots, making sustained, unnatural eye contact with the camera, leading fans to identify them as a cult plant monitoring Peter. The grief counseling support group likely contains multiple cult members beyond Joan, all positioned to manipulate Annie if Joan's approach failed. Neighbors and passersby in various scenes watch the Graham house with unusual intensity. During the film's climax, naked cult members appear throughout the house and yard, revealing they've had access to the property all along. The cult's omnipresence suggests the Grahams were never alone or safe. They were constantly surveilled by a network ensuring the ritual proceeded as planned. The classroom scene. Peter's literature class discusses Greek tragedy and predestination, foreshadowing his fate. The teacher lectures specifically about Heracles, who killed his family while under supernatural influence and bore no moral responsibility for actions beyond his control. She emphasizes the concept of hereditary curses and asks whether Heracles is a victim or a villain. The discussion happens shortly before Charlie's death, planting the philosophical framework for understanding the entire film. Peter appears distracted and disengaged during this lesson, unaware it's describing his own future. The teacher's emphasis on trying to avoid your fate and only making it come faster applies directly to Annie's desperate attempts to save her family, which ultimately enable the cult's success. Some theorists note the teacher's specific word choices and sustained focus on this particular play, suggesting she might be another cult member using literature to psychologically prepare Peter. The scene transforms from routine academic discussion into dark prophecy. Charlie's sketchbook. Charlie's drawings contain prophecies and cult imagery. The sketchbook shown throughout the film includes sketches of Paimon's sigil, drawings of crowned figures, and images that predict later events. One drawing appears to show a headless body, foreshadowing multiple decapitations. Another depicts 3 figures, possibly representing Annie, Peter, and Steve in their final states. The sketchbook also contains images of the treehouse decorated as a temple, revealing Charlie's awareness of the ritual's endpoint. When Steve burns the book in a desperate attempt to stop the supernatural events, he's destroying a roadmap that might have helped them understand what was happening. Joan specifically requests the sketchbook during her visit, suggesting cult members need it for the final ritual stages. Charlie's artistic compulsion wasn't creative expression, but Paimon documenting the cult's plans through the child's hands, the seance reality. The spirit Annie contacts during Joan's seance is not Charlie. While Annie believes she's communicating with her dead daughter, she's actually speaking with Paimon, or another demonic entity. The responses Annie receives are designed to manipulate her emotionally and convince her to continue using the ritual incantation. Real Charlie, if any part of her existed separately from Paimon, would warn Annie or resist the process. Instead, the Charlie at the seance provides exactly the emotional closure Annie needs to hear, keeping her engaged with the ritual. Joan controls the seance completely, feeding Annie the words to say and interpreting the spirit's responses. The entire exercise serves to implant the spoken spell into Annie's mind, so she'll repeat it later at the crucial moment, unknowingly facilitating Peter's possession. Symbolism overload. Hereditary is saturated with occult symbols hidden in plain sight. Paimon's sigil appears on the telephone pole, on necklaces worn by Ellen and Joan, carved into walls, and drawn in Charlie's sketchbook. The wallpaper in Ellen's bedroom contains repeating patterns that form demonic symbols when viewed from certain angles. Light fixtures throughout the house resemble ritual objects. The food at Ellen's funeral is arranged in symbolic patterns. The movie poster itself contains hidden imagery, with the treehouse positioned like a crown above the family. Ari Aster confirmed in interviews that the production designer embedded symbols in every set, creating a visual language that rewards repeated viewings. Some symbols are historically accurate occult references, others are invented for the film but maintain consistent meaning throughout. The sheer density of hidden imagery reinforces the theme that supernatural forces have infiltrated every aspect of the Graham family's existence, and nothing in their environment is neutral or safe. Annie's mother's motives, Ellen's true feelings toward her family remain debated. Annie describes her mother as secretive and manipulative, mentioning that Ellen tried to claim dissociative identity disorder to excuse her behavior. Ellen pushed Annie's father and brother toward self-inflicted deaths, demonstrating either callous disregard or active malice. However, some theorists argue Ellen genuinely believed she was elevating her family by offering Peter to Paimon. In her worldview, becoming the host for a demon king might be an honor rather than a curse. Ellen's note left for Peter expresses love and refers to the ritual as a gift. This doesn't make her actions less horrific, but it complicates her characterization beyond simple villainy. She may have been indoctrinated into the cult young enough that she genuinely couldn't understand the evil she was perpetrating, seeing demon worship as family tradition rather than abuse. Alternatively, she was simply a monster who destroyed multiple generations for power and occult knowledge, the real villain. The film's true antagonist is predestination itself. While Ellen orchestrates the practical elements and Paimon provides the supernatural horror, the deeper terror is that no character ever had free will. Annie was born into a cursed bloodline and manipulated from birth. Peter couldn't avoid his fate any more than he could choose different parents. Steve's rational attempts to protect his family were futile against forces beyond comprehension. Even Ellen, if recruited young, might have had her life's path determined before she could consent. Ari Aster has described the film as being about fate and whether agency exists when supernatural or deterministic forces control outcomes. The Greek tragedy parallels make this explicit. The Graham family is doomed regardless of their choices, and their attempts to escape only tighten the trap. Some viewers find this reading nihilistic, others find it a profound exploration of helplessness. The ambiguity about who deserves blame when everyone is trapped in an inescapable pattern makes Hereditary particularly unsettling. Peter's guilt. Peter's psychological breakdown after Charlie's death makes him vulnerable to possession. The extreme trauma of killing his sister, even accidentally, shatters Peter's sense of self and creates the emotional void Paimon needs to enter. Peter becomes nearly catatonic, dissociating from reality and withdrawing from his body psychologically. This dissociation mirrors possession, with Peter essentially vacating himself before the demon arrives. His guilt manifests as self-harm, social withdrawal, and inability to function, all weakening his psychological defenses. The cult likely planned for this response, knowing that Peter would blame himself and collapse under the weight. His vulnerability allows the ritual's final stage to proceed smoothly, with Peter too damaged to resist. The clicking sound begins after Charlie's death, suggesting Paimon starts infiltrating Peter as soon as the trauma hits. By the film's end, Peter's guilt has consumed him so completely that there's almost nothing left for Paimon to displace. If you found this valuable, subscribe so you never miss new content. Appreciate you watching.